Welcome to the Birding for Joy podcast, a show about discovering and exploring all the ways birding and wild birds bring joy into our lives. I'm Candi Lynn Fite, your gracious host and joyful birder. If you're curious about learning more about birding for joy, grab your favorite beverage, settle on your perch, and let's get into today's episode. Greetings, dear listeners. If you've listened to the show before, welcome back. If this is your first time tuning in, I am so happy you're here. It's mid-November, and there are only 3 more episodes until the end of Season 3, when I'll be taking a break for the holidays. Time really does fly when you're having fun and enjoying what you do. Providing birdie-ful content with this podcast is one of my favorite things. I hope the podcast brings you as much joy as it does me creating it. Reviewing my goals for Season 3, I only wish that I'd worked in a few more guest interviews. I found the planning and scheduling a bit more difficult than I anticipated. But there's always next season, right? If you hear moments of rain during the recording today, a cold front is moving in, and with it, we are receiving some much-needed rain. Okay, today's episode covers an important topic, one that many people don't really think about until it happens. What do you do when you encounter an injured, sick, or orphaned bird? What are the do's and don'ts? And what if the bird happens to be a large species, such as a raptor? Chances are the everyday person, even a birder, isn't prepared for such an event, as in the case of yours truly this past week. As birders, who more than likely love nature and wildlife, finding a wounded bird spurs an instinct and desire to help. It's a natural reaction. But we must educate ourselves so that we're equipped with the information and knowledge of how best to help when the situation occurs. No matter how much we may want to help the bird ourselves, we need to make a wise decision. Most often, we don't have the capabilities to properly care for the injured bird. And unless we are licensed wildlife rehabilitators, most wild bird species are protected by law, and it's illegal to possess these species, even if we aim to help the bird heal. As stated on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website, when handling wildlife, most states require permits or licenses, including federal permits, to rehabilitate wildlife, including most species of birds. For the animal's safety, yourself and your family, it's best to contact a professional. Even someone with the best of intentions can possibly cause more harm to the bird than good. However, if you're instructed by a licensed rehabber to help with the capture and transport of an injured bird, that's okay. Make sure to follow their instructions so you may safely assist helping improve the chances of the injured bird's survival. As an example, I'll use a personal experience that happened this past week. While babysitting my sick grandbaby, I happened to glance out my daughter's kitchen window and saw a large bird flailing against the fence in her backyard. Upon closer inspection, I discovered it was a turkey vulture. The poor thing froze once I got within a few feet and just lay there staring up at me, disoriented and exhausted. Since the bird made no attempt to fly or hop away, I knew something was wrong even though I saw no obvious signs of injury. If you've never seen a turkey vulture up close, let me tell you, they have a face only their mama could love. Now, despite its warty and wrinkled red mug, my heart melted. What had happened? How was it injured? Was it dying? And worse, what do I do? As a birder and nature lover, I knew I had to help. I recalled my county has a wildlife biologist at the county extension office, so I called them first. Unfortunately, the receptionist couldn't reach the person on the phone. At that dead end, I got online and searched for wildlife rehabilitation in my area. One phone call led me to another, and yet another. Finally, I reached someone from a wildlife rehab center about an hour away. She informed me that they had someone in the area transporting a wounded crested caracara and asked if I'd bring the turkey vulture 10 miles into town to meet the transport. She gave me instructions on how to capture the wounded bird safely for me and the bird. My husband joined the rescue efforts, bringing a large cardboard box, a large towel, and a pair of protective gloves. Of course, he insisted on being the hero by gently capturing the bird himself, per my instructions. I had to laugh when he requested I mention his efforts on the podcast. So, a big shout out to him for his assistance. I couldn't have done it without him. Afterward, I met the transport person in town with the injured turkey vulture. I checked in on the bird the following day and learned that it was a male and that he had suffered a broken wing. They suspected lead poisoning due to his neurological issues. More on the risks of lead poisoning in carrion-consuming species later in this episode. Now, the experience had a profound effect on me. The rescue event also proved to be a huge learning experience, one that I'd like to share with you, my fellow birders. I've combined my firsthand experience along with gathered research online to put together the information that I'm providing you. Trust me, don't think that a big part of me didn't want to be this turkey vulture's savior, heal him, and then have him love me forever. But with his suspected lead poisoning, there is no possible way that I could have provided him with the necessary care to help save him. As in all cases of injured birds and wildlife, it is best to leave it to the trained and licensed professionals. We can still be heroes by knowing that we did our part by getting the injured bird to someone who has the ability and resources, giving that bird the best possible chances of survival. Before we talk about the steps to take when you encounter an injured bird, I want to mention a few words about baby birds. If you happen upon a young bird with its feathers, even though it's not fully flying yet, unless you see visible injuries, chances are it's probably a fledgling, not abandoned, and the parents are around and tending to it. The fledgling stage for some species takes longer than others, meaning that the young bird may be seen hopping or fluttering on the ground for a few days. As long as you observe the parent birds tending to it, try not to intervene. If you see obvious signs of physical injuries, contact a wildlife center. If a nestling with only a few feathers or an unfeathered hatchling falls from its nest, or say a storm blows an entire nest down, you can try to help by replacing the nestling or nest. I've verified with several sources. The parent birds will not abandon the baby or the nest if you replace it. Despite what we may have heard before, the parent birds won't reject their babies because they smell a human scent. But still, it's best to use a soft cloth or gloves to handle the bird or nest. The risk really isn't about your human scent on the bird. It's more about possible contamination and the safety of the baby bird. Mammals could pick up your human scent when looking for food, placing that rescued baby in danger. Even if the nest was damaged and fell from a location somehow, you can collect it, place it in a small basket, and secure it back in place. Think something like one of those green plastic strawberry baskets lined with the original nesting material, and then zip-tied to the nest's original location or as close as you can get it. Whatever you use to hold the nest must have the ability to drain. It's also important not to try and feed or water the young bird yourself. Keep an eye on the replaced baby or nest from a safe distance. If after an hour or two you do not see the parents tending to the nest, think about contacting a wildlife rehabilitator and let them instruct you on what to do next. Now, if you know for a fact that the baby bird is orphaned, please don't try to raise that baby all by yourself. Contact a licensed rehabber. There are many resources online to help in situations like this, as well as locating a wildlife rehab professional in your area. As for injured, sick, or orphaned birds, large or small, raptor or songbird, from window strikes, cat attacks, illnesses, vehicular strikes, or observing odd behaviors, such as in the case with the turkey vulture, the steps to aiding these birds are somewhat similar. First, assess the situation. The safety of the creature comes only after your own. Do not put yourself in danger. Make a few mental notes and maybe even snap a few pictures. Information and photos will be helpful once you contact the rehabber. Following are the steps for the best outcome for the creature and your own safety. If it's a dire emergency or the bird is in a situation where it may be in further danger, follow through with steps 2 to 4 to contain the bird before contacting wildlife rehabilitation. Okay, step number 1, assess the situation. Gather information and pictures, and then contact the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. It's important to try and identify the species if possible. Some centers only take certain species. If this turns out to be the case, they hopefully can steer you to the right person. Step 2. Safely capture the bird and prepare it for transport. Gather supplies first. Several Audubon sites, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Texas Parks and Wildlife websites all mention do not place wild birds in any sort of metal cage, as this will likely cause further injuries if the bird starts to panic. Start by collecting a cardboard box. For a smaller bird, a cloth bag, paper sack, or shoebox works well. For larger birds, such as the turkey vulture, you'll need a larger box or possibly one of those plastic pet carriers. The box will need to have ventilation. Depending on the size of the bird, find a towel, cloth, or small blanket. You can line the bottom of the box with another cloth if you have one. You'll also need a pair of protective gloves. A wounded bird might be frightened enough to defend itself. A larger bird might try and use their beaks or talons. Remember, safety matters. As in the case of the turkey vulture, I was instructed to completely cover the bird because they can occasionally try to bite or pinch with their beaks, and sometimes they vomit when frightened. Step 3. Approach the bird slowly from behind. With the towel, carefully cover the bird's head and body and scoop it up gently into the box. Talking to it softly may help calm the bird's nerves and yours. Close the box and don't forget to leave a small folded opening or 2 for ventilation. You can also poke holes in the box before the capture. Step 4. Place the box in a quiet, dark, warm place until it's picked up or transported. Don't leave it outside or in the full sun. And make sure the bird won't be disturbed by pets or children. Most injured birds will be in some sort of state of shock. Keeping them in a quiet, dark place will help calm them, giving them a better chance for survival. Step 5. Confirm with the rehabber and follow their instructions. It's very important not to feed the bird or try to give it water while it's in your care. This is verbatim what the rehabber texted me while we were setting up for transport. Quote, "Do not give it any food or water. If it's introduced too quickly, they can run into organ failure, shock, etc." End quote. Side note, several of the websites I referenced for this episode mentioned that when you encounter a window strike victim after following the steps above, to release the bird if they recover away from any threat of windows. However, The Fatal Light Awareness Program, also known as FLAP Canada, suggests that any window strike bird should be seen by a licensed rehabilitation facility due to the possibility of internal injuries. Now, they have very detailed instructions on their website, which I will include a link in the show notes. By taking the steps above, you've helped with what we hope is the beginning of an injured or orphaned bird journey to survival, recovery, and hopefully freedom. On another note, I mentioned earlier that the rehabilitation facility that took in the injured turkey vulture suspected he had lead poisoning, which more than likely caused neurological symptoms, causing him to fall from his roosting spot or while flying, leading to the fractured wing. If you're wondering how on earth does a bird get lead poisoning, I'm about to tell you. The majority of the cases are from lead ammunition, not from the birds being shot themselves, but from consuming contaminated meat, either from untracked or unrecovered carcasses or unburied gut piles left by hunters. When a bullet enters its target, it fragments, and even if there's an exit site, approximately 1/3 of the bullet, either in fragments or residue, remains in the animal and has been found to scatter up to 18 inches from the entry point. The species that are most often affected are carrion-consuming raptors such as American eagles, black vultures, turkey vultures, and crested caracaras. But other species such as crows, hawks, and owls are sometimes subject to lead poisoning as well. Birds that spend a lot of time on the ground, such as mourning doves, can actually mistake spent shot for seed. Another source of lead poisoning comes from unrecovered or lost lead fishing tackle at the bottom of a lake or pond and can affect diving birds, such as the common loon. Lead poisoning symptoms can include many neurological issues: blindness, dizziness, the inability to walk or fly, dehydration, organ failure, starvation, and yes, death. Now, this all may sound grim and like quite a stretch, and some of you may even be thinking, seriously, Candi, how many birds are actually affected? Well, according to the American Bird Conservancy website, an estimated 16 million birds are poisoned by lead annually. That's a lot of birds, y'all. Now, I'll admit I am not a hunter, but living in Texas, I know a lot of folks who hunt. And many hunters are indeed big conservationists. The good thing is, there are two big ways that hunters can help. One is to use lead-free ammunition, and then the other is if the animal is dressed in the field to bury the unwanted remains. As the old country saying goes, buzzards gotta eat, same as worms, might ring true, but we don't want them consuming lead-contaminated food. They're better off eating roadkill. And lastly, carrion-consuming species are extremely important to healthy ecosystems. If anyone wants to know how much we need species such as vultures, read up on what happened when vultures nearly went extinct in India. It is not pretty. I will link an article from BBC in the show notes. Speaking of the show notes, I've included several links to websites that can offer you information and resources. I found most of the information out there consistent between the different sites. Every situation will be unique, and I think it's best just to be prepared if and when something happens. After last week, I saved the number of the local wildlife rehab center in my contacts. I also plan on making a rescue kit for my car, including a towel and small blanket, a pair of gloves, a cloth bag, and a broken down cardboard box. Hopefully, I will never need it, but I don't want to end up in another situation like I did with my injured turkey vulture and not be prepared. Well, phew, I did not intend for this episode to get so heavy, but there is a bright spot, one I'm extremely joyful about. I received an update on my turkey vulture. After 6 days, he's still hanging in there, Today, he was even able to stand up on his own. I know he's not out of the woods yet, but there is hope. I also filled out and emailed paperwork to sign up for volunteering at the facility taking care of him. Okay, I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I wish you well and joyful birding, my friends. If you are enjoying the Birding for Joy podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to the show. Subscribing and tuning in to the episodes lets the algorithm on each platform know the podcast is providing you worthwhile content. It also helps ensure the success of the show. Remember, the absolute best way to support your favorite podcast is by word of mouth. So make sure to share Birding for Joy with others who might enjoy listening. That way we continue to build a joyful birding community. As always, thank you for tuning in and stay chirpy, my friends.